Origins of the Korean War. Conclusion.
How to wrap up this lecture? Final words. The armistice that ended the fighting in 1953 did not lead to a peace treaty. Instead, that armistice put in place a system in which both the North and South Korea became one of the most militarized societies on earth. What is an armistice? Armistice is to be a stepping stone to a final resolution to the war. An armistice is important because you have to first stop the fighting and then work out a peace treaty. One of the most important elements of an armistice then is an agreement that you would not use the armistice as an opportunity to rearm or to reinforce your military capacity. Thus, in the armistice agreement signed in 1953, the key provision is 13D, Article 13D of the armistice. It reads that 13D, that the signers of this armistice will cease the introduction into Korea of reinforcing combat aircraft, armored vehicles, weapons, and ammunition. What does this mean? It means you have a certain number of tanks. You could bring in parts to repair those tanks, but you cannot bring in more tanks. You cannot bring in more airplanes. In 1958, the US commander of UN forces in the South unilaterally declared that the United States would no longer abide by Article 13D of the armistice. After that, the United States introduced into South Korea tactical nuclear weapons. With that, the armistice then became the vehicle by which both sides built up their armed forces. The establishment of two Koreas involved an exclusion, a fundamental exclusion in both North and South. The politics, the history behind the creation of two Koreas meant this quote-unquote sovereign decision to ban specific individuals and groups from the public, from the political and social communities. That is to say, you cannot be a communist and be a South Korean. You cannot be a communist sympathizer and be South Korean. In the North, you cannot be an anti-communist and be a North Korean, etc. So South Korea and South Korean sovereignty began with this fundamental exclusion, this ban. The logic here is not one of simple us versus them, South versus North. The logic here is that you cannot allow a free press. You cannot allow labor unions to form because that kind of freedom might harbor subversives. The logic here is that I or you, perhaps unknowingly, might be a subversive or an accomplice, that you or I might be a communist. And in that sense, communists dwelt permanently in the South Korean political imagination. South Korea under the US occupation was not a democracy. South Korea, when it was established in 1948, was not a democracy. It took a long time, many years and much sacrifice before South Korea became a democracy. Obviously today, South Korea is a democracy, but this democracy was not something given to the people of Korea. This democracy certainly was not something given to people of South Korea by the United States. This democracy was something that people in South Korea achieved through sacrifice and struggle. We'll end this lecture by looking at two clips from the documentary Grandmother's Flower, 할매꽃, directed and narrated by Moon Jung-hyun. This documentary won the UMPA Award for Best Documentary at the 2007 Busan International Film Festival. As his maternal grandmother is gravely ill, Moon Jung-hyun had wanted to document his family's history. It turned out that the history of his family contained many of the tragedies that were mentioned in this lecture. Through his discovery and reconstruction of his family's painful past, I hope you will get a sense, a visual and emotional sense of how that past still reverberates in present-day Korea.